All right, everyone. Welcome. So, I'm not going to wait around for folks to get here. I'm just going to get started right into it. And I do need to apologize in advance if my dog starts to bark because he's the dumbest dog that I've ever encountered. And yet he always seems to know when I'm going live. So, I'm not going to stop if he starts barking, I think. So, yesterday I was having a conversation with somebody who um, is in the army and spent a year, I think, in the Ukraine training Ukrainian soldiers to prepare for what has actually finally happened. And he and I are not on the same page politically in a lot of ways, but um, we have had conversations about his experiences, and he knows that I respect what they did there, what the American troops did there, and you have to respect the Ukrainians for putting up the fight that they've done. But I was surprised when he came up and he asked me, um, all on his own. I didn't say anything. He said, "So, what do you think? We close to World War III?" And I said, "Well, um, yeah, it's kind of feeling that way." One thing led to another, and we were talking about the Chinese balloon kind of thing, and he had a slightly different take. I think one of the memes that I have kind of cycling through here kind of refers to a little bit, just well, his point was, and he made a good point that the people who are in charge of these things know what they're doing, and if they thought it was a threat, they had to have known about it all the way back in when it was in China still, and they were watching it. And he has every confidence that the military was aware of what kind of a threat it might pose, that sort of thing. And for it wasn't quite as big of a deal for him, except for he understood that it was a provocative thing that would divide the country, and that is true. It has divided the country. And I made a couple of counterpoints that he seemed to appreciate, and it's those counterpoints right now that I'm going to present in this video. So last week on Wednesday night, I went live just as I heard about this. You can go and check that. It was very much off the cuff. I was on my way to bed. I saw the news story. I said, "Oh, geez, here we go." And so I just went with it. So go back and look at that, and a lot of my points still stand, and I want to elaborate on those points today. So the problem is with something like this is that it's not necessarily, how do I put it? It's not necessarily the case that um, I believed that there was a nuclear bomb in it or an EMP or something like that. But what something like that does is it brings to the table the possibility of something happening, which obviously could not have been possible in other under other circumstances. So obviously, I mean, this goes without saying, I guess, in a way. Uh, China can't drop a nuclear bomb from a balloon if there is no balloon over the skies. Now we have shown what our response is going to be if a balloon comes over our skies, right? It's apparently to do nothing. Okay, so if they did it the first time and we did nothing until it had made its way all the way across the country and already completed its mission, then it stands to reason that there's a good chance that we'll do the same thing the next time. So maybe the next time there will be a nuclear bomb on there or an electromagnetic pulse device of some kind. So they learned from that, right? The Chinese, they're gonna gain that data and they're gonna process it. And I mean, I guess I hope that it's like a big game of chess that we're not necessarily going to do the same thing in response. We don't want to be predictable, right? Right. But then what was the counter story that we heard? In fact, one of these memes that I have showing, um, that one right there, in fact, says that there were three that flew over during the Trump presidency, and nothing happened. That meme says he hid them. I personally believe the denials about that, but it doesn't matter. It could just as easily be true, and it only makes my point even more. It means that a foreign country has gotten into the habit of flying these balloons over our country unmolested, and if not for the fact that this one was um, seen by somebody, uh, a civilian, maybe we wouldn't have ever known about this one either. So eventually, that information that we're just going to let balloons fly over is going to be used in a very serious way against us. And I think part of the problem is, and this is kind of why I'm doing this video, is that, and there's actually a name for this. It's called the normalcy bias. It's like a logical fallacy that says that just because things were the same yesterday and the day before that, they'll be the same today. And history shows that that's not really the case at all. That's not how it happens. And I'm going to go through here in a few minutes and just go over um, history that we know, and also history with it, like history before I was alive, and then history within recent memory, things that should tell us very clearly that we are not right in believing that tomorrow is going to be the same as today. I'm just going to jot down a note here so I make sure that I don't forget to make a note or a point that I want to make. Okay, there I got it. So, so the but the issue is in light of the fact that there are, as a matter of history, events which have consequences that reverberate and change the history of our nation and the history of our world, in our own personal histories as well, um, in dramatic, somewhat unpredictable ways. We then begin to wrestle with the question of, well, um, how do we prepare for those? Are the people who are supposed to insulate us from those events up to the job? Are they actually competent? Are they able to do it? Because you only have to be wrong once. So let's say, just hypothetically, just choose whichever political side that you want. Uh, Side with Biden, side with Trump, whatever, and just let's just pretend that your people are the ones who are the absolute best in the world. Just picture them, right? And either way, according to this narrative, whether it was Trump that was president or Biden was the president, they've been letting these balloons fly. Okay, on this scenario, do we think that any of that these people are omniscient? That are the people in charge of keeping our country safe are omnipotent. They're incapable of making mistakes, of allowing uh, horribly tragic things to occur. Well, this this is one of the counterpoints that I gave to my army friend who helped train Ukrainian soldiers. Okay, well, what about 9/11? Okay, so we want to believe that our military is capable, that our politicians and our bureaucrats are capable of managing threats, um, and preventing them from happening. And let's just posit that they stopped a whole bunch of them from happening leading up to 9/11, and yet 9/11 did happen. Those guys got through, and they blew up a bunch of things. They killed almost 3,000, right around 3,000 people, and it put our country on an entirely different trajectory. Now, I don't know about you, but I actually read the 9/11 Commission report. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a very thick book. I read it cover to cover, and one of the big takeaways that I got from that and from the whole event is, and this was as a young man, I had I kind of leaned left actually at that time. Um, it was holy crap. I mean, our government effed up bad. They totally should have seen what was coming and stopped it. They had they had all the information that they needed to pull that together. But the problem is, and this is the thing, we want to believe that with all the experts in the world, if they have all the money and the resources that they need, and all the biggest bureaucracies, give them everything that they want, that they will be almost like God in being able to manage our affairs. And no, they're men and women, just like other men and women. Most of them are. The sad truth is, most of them are actually stupid. That's the other problem. But I was positing that they're actually smart. So we'll just go with that. Even if they're 100% smart and competent, the amount of data and information that they have to process is so extensive that it's almost inevitable that they will fail. And that's all fine and dandy, I suppose, for most of us. But if you happen to be in the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001, there was some serious consequences. But that type of incident didn't just affect the people on the ground, it would lead to incursions into Afghanistan and Iraq that shook this country. And a lot of American servicemen and women went overseas and died. Families sent their sons and fathers, and I think there was some women that died as well. And they died, okay, because of that failure, because of that failure. So like I said, they only have to be wrong once. Let's take another one. And I actually have a long list, but the points that I'm making right now, the specific ones that I'm talking about, are the cases where um, things happened that our government should have known about and should have been able to do something about, and and did not, and failed terribly. And one of those has to be COVID-19 itself, the coronavirus pandemic. And it's not an accident, in my opinion, that in this particular case, China is at the heart of it. It's really astonishing I don't know how much you've gone and you've looked at. I'm not just talking about the origins. I'm not talking about the weapons lab thing, which is it's obviously, in my opinion, that's obviously where it came from. And I don't even. Well, I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, I guess, right now. But if you go and you look at that, there was plenty of reason, even in the December of 2019, there to know that something was seriously wrong in China. They should have known. And if they didn't know, why didn't they know? What are we spending all of our money on? What are they getting paid for? What is their malfunction? And I'm talking about the Americans here. I'm talking about the American government. I'm talking about the people who are supposed to be spying on everybody, right? I mean, this is what they do. They spy on everybody. Um, they collect all this information, all this analysis, and there was all sorts of data from December 2019 into January 2020 that indicated that something seriously wrong was happening in China. And what did China do? China, knowing full well what they had, let their their holiday, their people on holiday. It was, I think, the Chinese New Year that was being celebrated. So those people came and they just it infected people, just spread throughout all of China at the time, before for almost like 3 weeks, and they let them travel overseas, knowing exactly what had happened. To me, this is an act of war by the part of China, in my opinion. But yeah, Trump did shut down air travel from China and eventually from everyone else. But all these big bureaucrats, all this big money is supposed to be doing good, and look what their failure did. How many millions of people around the world died because of that incompetence? How many more are going to die because of that same act of incompetence? So yeah, um, we let a Chinese spy balloon meander across the country at a very high altitude, unmolested, and deliberately waited until it basically had completed its mission, and then we shot it down. No, what could go wrong? Well, I mean, you could get out the conspiracy theory stuff, but one of the thing I'm just gonna mention it. It's the possibility of an EMP. And actually, I should I wonder if I can pause that image right there. Maybe I'll just move the memes aside for a minute. 'Cause it's worth looking at this, in my opinion. Just give me a second here. I know right where it is. Here we go. So I actually wrote a book in 2006, 2008. It's actually part of a series. So several books, I guess you could say, where there's an EMP attack um, on the country, and there's also a viral attack, and that's because my study into these things goes back now 20 years. 9/11 put the fear of God into me, and in my opinion, what I learned from 9/11 is that basically we really are on our own, and that's kind of where I'm going with this example with the balloon. If they're wrong, if this is the time that they're wrong, you know what? They can say they're sorry later, but you could be dead today. So, thanks for your help, government. But maybe you're not dead. Maybe your loved ones are, because you know something hit. The one thing got through. But anyway, so I did a lot of study on EMPs and such. And so what you see from this diagram, and this is from a document that I have in another video that I've already posted. The way that these things work is that actually the higher that they are, the further is their impact. And obviously the megaton strength of the device matters too, right? Of course. But I want you to look. It's funny to me, where it says surface zero there, that little black dot is almost exactly where that balloon was at one point. And I remember seeing it go that way, and I was aware of this figure, and I was like, oh, come on. No, they won't do it. They can't do it. It's just, but anyway, the mountain ranges could absorb some of that, but the Midwest would have been toast in an EMP. And I don't know if you've thought about what life would be like without our electricity, without the grid. And you should think about that. You should think very long and hard about that, and ask yourself if you've got what you need to survive, not in without electricity. I mean, never mind the EMP thing, just without electricity. I mean, look at Texas with this the snow and ice storm that they had a couple years ago. That was pretty rough, right? There was the Carrington event. Look that up. That would have wreaked havoc. There's hurricanes. There's natural disasters. There was a big power outage in New York and um, that whole area, that whole region. Oh, when was that? Well, you could look it up. Is it maybe 2003? No. Anyway, I don't want. So power can go out. It does happen, and people have died from the power going out. People who are on like life support, or elderly, vulnerable people die when the power goes out, because ventilators turn off, um, or there's no air conditioning in they're in their house and it gets too hot, or the other way around. They require the electricity to heat their home. That happens. That happens. But now imagine if it happens across the entire country. So one of the things that came up in the conversation with my army friend was about this whole World War III thing. And like I said, he was bringing this stuff up. It wasn't me. I'm a known conspiracy theorist, I guess you could say. But he's just a normal guy. And even he's like, well, crap, man, this is just not looking good. And he's thinking, uh, China invades Taiwan within within 3 years. And I didn't want to tell him. I'm thinking that's more like 3 months. It seems more likely to, or as likely, I guess I should say, to me. But as I talked about in the first video that I did on this, when China decides to go to war, they're going to make sure that we stay out of it. They're in it to win it. They don't want a global war. And so what are they going to do? What are they going to do to keep us down? Do you think you know? Do you know their mind so well? I mean, this is the problem. You say, "Wow, they would never do that. That's ridiculous." Well, what? Like the Japanese would never bomb Pearl Harbor? No, I mean they would never do that. That'd be foolish, right? Or Al Qaeda wouldn't bomb the Pentagon, Congress, and the World Trade Center. No, no, no. Gee, you really think you know the minds of evil people? Do you think you're that smart? Do you think that we've got a government filled with smart people who know the minds of these people so well that they can predict what they're going to do? That they know that? No, you can't predict it, because they're out there trying to be unpredictable. So I'm not saying that I think that China's going to do an EMP attack, I do expect that there's going to be a massive cyber attack for sure. Um, that is coordinated when they finally decide to attack Taiwan, and they will. They will attack Taiwan, and America probably will do nothing about it. Um, America probably won't do anything for Taiwan, in part because we just don't have the political will to go and intercede for Taiwan. But I think China is going to go out of its way to make sure that we stay out of that fight, and that could be through a cyber incursion, or it could be. I mean, who knows, right? This is what I'm saying. It could be that they now that they know you can fly a balloon over and nothing ever happens to it. It could be that they decide to put that over the Earth at about si- however many miles up. See, it was. I think I heard it was like 12 miles up. So 12 miles only gives you a small part of the country there. But if you're looking at that, maybe they send more than one, or maybe they position it in just the right spot. Maybe they knock out our NORAD or whatever they're doing these days. They got a good look at the country. I'm not saying they're going to do that. I'm just saying they now know that we will do nothing, or there's a good chance that we'll do nothing. It's all a big chess game, and my point is that you only need to be wrong once. So there's actually a long history. This is where I was going with trying to get to, because to me, I don't really care about the political aspect of this, although I have political thoughts about this. To me, it does go back to the 9/11 experience of seeing how many clues were missed, and then we had the attack and thousands of people died, and et cetera, et cetera. This is an example of what I have been trying to say on this channel about how we really are on our own. We have got to manage our own risks, because we cannot just assume that the people that are out there are going to be competent enough to stop all of the threats. And I've only talked really about the threat so far, at least, that are have malevolent people on the other side of it. People actually trying to actively harm us. There are the other events, which I mentioned, like the Carrington event. But hey, if you're in Turkey or Syria right now with the earthquakes, I don't know if you heard about that. Thousands of people dead. Okay, so when a building starts falling around you, what are you going to do? Are you going to wait for your bureaucrat to come rescue? No, you're going to figure out what you have to do to survive in that motion, that moment. And we're just too soft and too I'm not even sure what the I guess it would be complacent would be the best word. It's this normalcy bias. We just think that tomorrow is going to be the same as today, even though we have all this evidence that it doesn't work that way. So I'm going to go through a list of other examples, because I feel like um, one of the biggest things we have to get through our heads is that the systems that are out there right now are so big and massive that you'd have to be God, actually God, in order to manage them successfully. They're inevitably going to fail. But let's just go through a list, because it's only gotten worse, of history shaking things that often result in people dying that they didn't even see it coming. So let's just start with World War One, right? How did World War One start? And I'm not going to dwell on all these very much. You had an assassination, and one thing led to another, blah blah blah, and hundreds of thousands and millions of people dead, and an entirely reordering of the country, right? Of the world, excuse me. The Great Depression, right? The Great Depression. Everyone remember that? We don't think about it very much, but hey, those kinds of economic collapses actually do happen. They happen, and that was a that left a mark on the country that I wouldn't. I don't. I'm not going to say that it still remains because so many people have forgotten about it, but our grandparents remember it. This is why they don't trust banks, and it's probably why we shouldn't trust banks too. By the way, um, Pearl Harbor. I mentioned Pearl Harbor, right? Wake up one morning and find out, hey, 3,000 sailors are dead, and you're at war. And again, you had a world changing event that ended up with thousands and thousands of Americans dead. And that of course is just Japan. That doesn't even include Hitler. I could talk about um, the European theater as well. Now, and what's interesting about all three of these cases that I've just given is that if you go back and you look through history, they say hindsight is 2020. In almost every one of these, there were so many clues um, that that indicated that problems were coming. So when we talk about a black swan event, we usually talk about something that's like totally unexpected, can't be predicted, but actually, so many of them can be predicted and were predicted, and that's what I'm telling you. I don't want. That's what I'm saying. Everything is lining up against us right now. There's so many things that are really fragile right now, and this is a bad time to engage in the normalcy bias. But I don't want to dwell on those particular cases. We certainly talk about them more some other time. But let's look at a different kind of black swan event. The rise of the internet could be considered a black swan event, right? Um, was not quickly foreseen what the significance or impact of that would be, and it's obviously altered our life in significant ways. I'm not so sure I would say that it's led to deaths, although if push came to shove, I could maybe make an argument actually in different ways. But it's obviously altered our life in significant ways over the last 20 years, just in our lifetime. Have we considered with like Chat GPT and AI coming out? It's only been 2 decades. I was there when AOL was launched. I was one dial up. I was there. I was at the very beginning. So what are we at? We're at maybe 30 years, give or take. Um, yeah, I don't. People are gonna start thinking I'm pretty old. Well, yeah, okay. But my point is that as a society and as individuals, we are not prepared for what it means to have a technological mind, like to grow up in front of a screen from cradle to grave. What does that do to human? What does it do to humanity? Can we look into the future here and see what might happen? I would say that the clues are actually there and it does not look good. We my the thing that I teach my kids about technology is that very simple. That and it's not just about technology, but a lot of things. We want to be the masters of technology. We don't want technology to master us. Well, it seems that the way that we're going, technology is mastering us. And if we're not the master of technology, then that means we're the slave. And we have a society that's leading that way. So I'm giving that as an example of something that people couldn't predict. There's no malevolent aspect to it necessarily. It's not like China trying to bomb us. It's just something that happened that was unexpected, and it's laying down these breadcrumbs about what could happen in the future, and we're just going merrily on our way as a society. And what I'm telling you, my viewers on this channel, is you can't be that person. You've got to look ahead. What is the world likely going to look at 10 years from now because of the trajectory that we're on? And based on that analysis, maybe you like where it's going, and I guess it's possible too. But don't you want to be ahead of the curve? Do you want to be reacting, or do you want to be making a plan so that you can you can survive that or endure that or not lose your soul or whatever it is, or not lose your kids to just becoming zombies in front of a screen, your grandkids. I'm gonna go on. I have some other ones. Um, Here's another example of uh, a different way of thinking about black swan events. Let's go back and think about 9/11. So we think about 9/11 from our perspective, from the prism of Americans and the West. But think about what 9/11 represented to the people in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? So they didn't wake up on September 11th, 2001, and most of them at least didn't say, oh wow, we just lost 3,000 of our people. We're in for it now. This is war. I mean, some of the wise ones obviously saw what was coming, especially in Afghanistan. But that event in New York City and Washington D.C. and in the field in Pennsylvania, that had reverberations that led to the destruction of a whole nation. The Iraqi nation was laid desolate. So, wow, did not see that coming, right? Something happens in New York and in a whole different country, and 5 years later, your country's a virtual wasteland. It's a war zone, and it would be that way for like a decade. We have a somewhat similar um, parallel with what's going on in the Ukraine right now. Russia invades Ukraine. What does that matter to us? Well, that's kind of a little bit like saying some dude assassinates another dude in a car in Serbia. What does it have to do with us? Can't we start looking ahead? Why do we have to be always so surprised at how these things escalate and develop and change? We're sending tanks now to the Ukraine, and we said we weren't going to do that. I think we said that about the Patriot missile system too. We weren't going to do that, and well, they're going there too. Gee, I mean, uh, if you're here from the very beginning, you heard me say that this isn't necessarily a political thing. Trump, Biden, whatever. But Biden says that there's not going to be American boots on the ground in Ukraine, and I'm just saying, you can have a 100% capable government, and they can't know that. They can't determine what's in the mind of Putin, that he's going to do something. How do they know he's not going to do something that suddenly brings us into the war by arming his enemies? So I'm just saying that the whole what happened to Afghanistan and Iraq after 9/11 analogy does not necessarily um, skip over us. I mean, these events could affect us as well. And if we don't want that to happen as a nation, then we should be doing different things. But one of my messages on this channel is we're screwed. You can't count on the government to do anything right. You're better off planning on them doing something wrong. So you're just better off assuming they're going to screw up and ask yourself, well, what are you going to do if World War III breaks out? And I'll tell you, for about 5 years, I've been telling my kids, my sons who are now military age, to watch these things closely. And if it looks like it's going to develop into warfare, they should actually consider joining the service and do so intelligently so that they can choose where they go instead of being drafted or something. So we've had these conversations in my family, and for your family, you might need to have different conversations or make different kinds of plans. And of course, you just World War III. I mean, everyone assumes it's going to be nuclear. So I mean, if that's the case, then that's a whole new level of planning you got to be thinking about. But anyway, um, I wanted to bring up another kind of black swan type event. The housing bubble of 2000, which burst in 2008 and 2009. That was pretty significant. That pretty much shook the globe. Was it predictable? Well, Michael Burry predicted it and made a fortune. So the question is, why didn't we? Why didn't the rest of us? And if he was able to do it, why couldn't our best and brightest at the Federal Reserve and all these other places that are supposed to be watching out for us? And actually, if you trace that back, you're going to go all the way back to the beginnings of that, and you go to 1977, Jimmy Carter and the Community Reinvestment Act, which essentially required banks to lend money to people that were not credit worthy. And one thing led to another, and you had a whole bunch of bad loans piled up, and people got creative about how to deal with that. So you actually had clues, you had breadcrumbs, and you can't. I mean, 1977. I mean, I didn't find out about that until you know a lot. I was very young in '77. Don't hold it against me for not knowing about the Community Reinvestment Act when I was wearing diapers or something. But in the 1990s and 2000s, the writing was on the wall. We saw what was happening. We we saw it, and Michael Burry made a ton of money from it. So what's our excuse as we go forward? I think a lot of it is we just don't want to embrace the possibility that things can go to hell. We don't want to live like that, and I'm telling you, it's more likely than not. Just in the brief video that I've talked about so far, we've got in our living memory, we have 9/11, we have 2000 the 2008 fiasco. So there's two things. We had and then we had COVID. So there's three really huge things that are fairly malevolent um within what, let me do my math, 20 years. So black swan events aren't actually rare. They're almost kind of normal. We're like one every 10 years. So get ready. I mean, people in my life, not on my channel. I don't get enough interaction on my channel yet. But people in my life say, well, you're kind of overreacting a little bit. Making a lot of stuff out. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll just tell you. I don't mind bragging, but when nobody else was watching what was happening in China in December of 2019, I I wasn't watching anything in December of 2019 because I do rely on the media and various sources. I mean, there's nothing that I can do if no one's doing any talking. But in January of 2020, I was already stocking up. I was already buying masks. This is when I before I'd actually done any research into them, but I was stocking up. I wasn't waiting. I told you before, I wrote a book in 2006 about a pandemic and an EMP attack. So I knew I knew what it could be. COVID didn't end up being as dangerous as the disease that I wrote about, but it could have been. I wasn't waiting around. So why I don't know why people are surprised. I'm gesturing. You can't even see because I got this thing in there. Well, you couldn't see it anyway, but let's get this out of the way. I don't think I need to talk about the Heinen. I don't even know how to say it. Actually, how long is this? 43 minutes. Okay. I'm gonna um I'm gonna keep going through my list and try to wrap it up because no one will watch something this long. Uh okay, so I think that last bit really made the point. You had 9/11, you had the 2008 financial crisis, and you had COVID. You've got you've got three big things where the government and all the smart people were supposed to take care of us, and they utterly failed. They completely failed, and people died. If they didn't die in the towers, they died in Afghanistan. It didn't even have to be Americans. They could have been Afghans who died, Iraqis. People died, and obviously a lot of people died with COVID all over the world because of incompetence. Well, what kinds of things are we looking at right now? If if I have convinced you that we should not believe that tomorrow will be the same as yesterday, here are the things that I think you should be looking at, and I guess I'm going to just wrap it up really fast. So I'll have to return to it. But one is obviously our 30 plus $1 trillion in debt as a country. I'm amazed that we have not had an economic collapse already. Um, Really, it's really remarkable. And one of the things about when you get into the economic collapse is it's one of those things where it's everything happens slowly and then it happens fast, right? Slow, 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 and then boom, overnight. And I think that's what's going to happen. So we're going to continue piling up this $1 trillion in debt, and we're going to think that we can get away with it forever, and then one day, probably overnight, we'll find out we can't. All of a sudden, it'll just all come crashing down. I just don't see how the nation can continue to sustain that kind of debt. And that's just that doesn't even include the unfunded liabilities, which put it well over $100 trillion. So that's just one. I'm trying to be fast now to try to keep this, under an hour. Um, the China and Taiwan. Okay, this is a serious developing threat, and it's probably bigger than, I mean, when you sit down and you think about it, it's bigger than you might realize, because of all the nonsense with the whole Trump colluding with the Russians thing, and that was all just, we know that was all made up at this point. We, as a country, pushed Russia away and towards China. Russia and China formed an alliance, a military alliance, and they have been doing military exercises when previously they had not. How stupid of the people who did that. One of the great big successes, like, love them or hate them, Nixon and Kissinger, they divided. It's the Sino-Soviet split. They divided the Soviet Union from Mao's China and kept them from combining forces. Well, the brainiacs of the last 5 years have pushed Russia and China together, and Russia is doing what it's doing in part because it knows that China isn't necessarily got its back per se, but it knows that it can sustain itself economically and militarily because they can always go for resources with China. And it's one of those, if you scratch my back, I scratch your back things. So now it's going to be China's turn. And then what's Russia going to do? We've made them out to be these great demons. And hey, okay, they're great demons. Make that fine. I'm with you. They're great demons. But on the other hand, having the two great demons as allies is bad. I mean, why would we want that? But that's what's happening. And so I eventually China's going to go for Taiwan, and I'm very very confident that because we have made pledges of support, even though they're ambiguous pledges, they are pledges of support for Taiwan. A lot like Britain and France saying that they would defend Poland if Germany invaded. We were a little bit more ambiguous than that with regards to Taiwan, but we are, on the record there. And China's not gonna. China was gonna go for Taiwan. They're absolutely gonna do it. But since they know our stance, they're not gonna just do nothing. I think they're gonna bloody our nose somehow, either a cyber attack or something like this. So that is another thing. Something that I would recommend that you pick up and read. It's a book by two Chinese. One is a general and one's an academic, I think, called Unrestricted Warfare. It really tells you what the kinds of things they're going to do, and basically, the whole idea of that book, and this is in their own words, is to declare war on the United States, but not do so in a way that riles up the Americans and gets them to declare war without America knowing that war has been declared on them, because that doesn't usually end well. Just like Pearl Harbor didn't end well for the Japanese, and 9/11 didn't work out for Al Qaeda. China is not going to make that mistake. So those are our two big examples, I think, that we need to be looking at. It's the economic side, and um, it's the international affairs with China and Taiwan as a flashpoint. And we're at 50 minutes here, and I so much to say, so little time. But if you have watched this whole time, I thank you for it. Um, Give me questions or comments if you want more information about my sources and the things that I've been studying and learning about. I'd love to talk about them in one of my future videos. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about. No, I don't even want to talk about it now. There's just so much. I have so much to say, and there's just not enough time to do it. 50 minutes wasn't even enough, and that's where we're at now. So I guess we'll just leave it at that for now. Keep watching my channel. Here's what I am saying. In some of my future videos, I intend to share more of the practical steps that I have taken to position my family and those who I love, who care what I think, so that whatever happens, we will be nimble enough to act, and maybe we won't survive. Maybe, I mean, there's some things you just can't avoid, If an earthquake happens underneath you and collapses your house on you, I guess, I mean, you're toast. What are you going to do? But there are things that you can do. And I'm going to share some of those practical things that I've been doing to be ready for who knows what for the last 20 years. So, um, pretty big topic. Plenty of content. Stick around, watch those videos, and if you think that this is valuable and useful, or you think that people who need to hear this message or the things that I talk about, you know what to do. Share the links, like, subscribe, tell them to get involved with the channel. That's the way to do it. Hope I've been of service to you. Enjoy your evening. Thanks for watching. This is the Philosopher King 2.0 signing off.